What would you do if the man you just married threw a plate at you on your wedding night? Would you walk away? Would you stay and try to understand? Because that's exactly what happened to me. Only it wasn't just a plate that shattered. It was everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the future we were supposed to build together. A stunned silence fell over the room as the plate shattered against the floor. My husband had thrown it aimed at me, though it barely missed. The sound of the crash rang louder than the vows we had exchanged just hours before. Gasps rippled through the wedding hall, but I couldn't move. My mind raced, my heart pounded, and my cheeks burned with a mixture of rage and humiliation. I locked eyes with him, hoping for regret, for an apology. Anything but his face was nothing but fury. For the first time, I saw a man I didn't recognize. My fingers gripped the edge of the table, my body trembling as I fought back tears. That night, I walked out, leaving my dress in a heap on the floor. I swore I'd never speak to him again, but the phone call I received the next day turned my world upside down. I had always believed in love, the kind that feels like home, where you laugh without fear and cry without judgment. That's what I thought I had found in Jasper. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He was my best friend, my rock, the one who knew me better than anyone else. We met in college, bonding over late-night study sessions and cheap takeout. Over the years, we built a life together, piece by piece, dream by dream. When he proposed, it felt like the natural next step, like the next chapter in a story we had been writing all along. Our wedding day was meant to celebrate everything we had built. Friends and family filled the room, toasting to our future. But beneath the surface, cracks had begun to form. Small arguments about finances, disagreements about priorities. I brushed them off, convinced they were just normal pre-wedding jitters. Then, at the reception, the unthinkable happened. We had argued over something trivial, like a misplaced seating card, but his anger escalated in a way I had never seen before. And when the plate flew, so did my world. I left that night, still in shock, replaying the moment over and over. Was this the man I had promised to spend my life with? Was this the love I had believed in so fiercely? Little did I know, the real turning point wasn't that night. It was the call I never expected the next day. The morning after the wedding, I woke up in a daze. My head throbbed, the emotions of the night before still echoing in my body. I had slept on my sister Willow's couch, the remnants of my wedding makeup smeared across my face. She handed me a cup of coffee, her expression full of concern. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. "I don't know," I murmured, staring at the steam rising from my mug. My mind felt like a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and disbelief. How could Jasper, the man I thought I knew so well, have acted this way? I replayed the scene in my head, the plate flying, his face twisted in rage, and the hushed murmurs of our guests as I stormed out. By mid-morning, the whispers had turned into rumors. Friends texted, trying to piece together what had happened. Social media was a minefield of wedding photos and well-meaning captions like, "What a beautiful night." The contrast made my stomach churn. Then, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Jasper. My hand hovered over the decline button, but something in me hesitated. I let it go to voicemail. When I finally listened to his message, his voice was shaky. "I know I messed up," he began. "Please, just let me explain. I need to see you." The nerve of him. After everything, he wanted me to hear him out? My anger flared anew. I decided I wouldn't answer. Instead, I began plotting a way to make him feel the pain I'd felt. I spent the next few days crafting my plan. He had humiliated me in front of everyone, so I wanted to return the favor. I envisioned showing up at his workplace, spilling everything to his colleagues, or maybe I'd share the story online, ensuring he'd never live it down. Each idea felt satisfying at first, but something gnawed at me. A small voice in the back of my mind asking, "What will this achieve?" Still, I silenced it. My pride demanded justice. One evening, as I scrolled through photos from the wedding, my anger deepened. There he was, smiling beside me in the earlier moments of the day, as if nothing was wrong. I felt like a fool. That's when I decided to confront him, not for closure, but to deliver the first blow of my revenge. I called him and agreed to meet at a quiet cafe. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting at a corner table. He looked disheveled, his tie loosened, and his face pale. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, his voice barely audible. I crossed my arms and stayed standing. "You've got 10 minutes. He sighed deeply and ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know where to start, but I owe you an explanation. What happened that night?" He trailed off, his eyes clouding with shame. "I don't need excuses, Jasper," I snapped. "You threw a plate at me on our wedding day. That's not something you just apologize for and move on." His eyes widened. "I wasn't aiming at you, He stopped himself, taking a deep breath. "I know that doesn't make it okay. I lost control. I've been under so much pressure, work, the wedding, everything, and I just snapped." His words felt hollow, but there was a vulnerability in his tone I hadn't expected. Still, I wasn't ready to let him off the hook. "Pressure? What's your excuse? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me?" "I know," he said quietly, "and I hate myself for it. But there's more to it, Serafina. I've been struggling with something I didn't know how to tell you about." I froze. Struggling? What was he talking about? Jasper hesitated before continuing. "A few months ago, I started having these episodes, anger, frustration, like I couldn't control myself. It scared me, but I didn't want to burden you. I thought I could handle it on my own." I stared at him, trying to process his words. Was this genuine or just another excuse? "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice softer now. "I didn't want to ruin things," he admitted. "I thought if I just pushed through it, it would go away. But that night, it all came out in the worst possible way. I've been seeing someone, a therapist, to figure out what's going on." The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. Part of me wanted to scoff, to call him out for not trusting me sooner. But another part, the part that still cared, felt a pang of compassion. I left the cafe that day with a mind full of questions, my heart still raw and aching. The idea of revenge that had once felt so justified now seemed empty, like a hollow echo of the anger I couldn't let go of. Over the next week, I struggled to reconcile my feelings. On one hand, I was still devastated, still furious with him. On the other, there was the sincerity in Jasper's words, which refused to fade away. Could I really believe him? Could I ever consider forgiving him after everything? Willow became my rock during this time, my sounding board. "You don't owe him anything," she said, always the voice of reason. "But maybe it's not just about him. Maybe it's about what you need to move forward." Her words hit home, settling deep within me. What did I need? Revenge had seemed like the perfect answer at first, but the more I dwelled on it, the more it felt like a burden I wasn't willing to carry. I had to ask myself, did I want to be defined by my anger? Or could I find a way to rise above it? In the quiet moments of reflection, memories of my relationship with Jasper flooded back. I thought about how he'd been there for me during my mother's illness, how he'd stayed up with me, helping me study for my certification exam. These memories didn't erase the hurt, but they complicated my feelings. I realized my anger wasn't just about that night, the shattered plate, the humiliation. It was about a betrayal of trust, a feeling that the foundation of our relationship had cracked, leaving me questioning everything. If I wanted peace, I needed to address that, not through revenge, but through honesty. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone and dialed Jasper's number. "Can we talk?" I asked, this time not seeking revenge, but answers and perhaps a way forward. We met at a park near my apartment. The air was crisp, and the scent of freshly fallen leaves filled the atmosphere. The distant sound of children playing added an odd sense of normalcy to what felt like a pivotal moment in my life. He stood by a bench, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his shoulders slumped. As I approached, he looked up, his eyes weighed down by exhaustion, and maybe a glimmer of hope. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice soft. I sat down, making sure to keep a safe distance. "This doesn't mean anything yet," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I need to understand not just what happened that night, but everything that led up to it." Jasper nodded, his jaw tightening as he took a deep breath. "You deserve that. I just hope you'll believe me." And then he spoke, slowly, carefully. He told me about the months before our wedding, how his job had been overwhelming him, the impossible demands, the panic attacks he'd been hiding, the sleepless nights. He admitted to feeling unworthy of me, convinced he was failing as a partner before we even began our life together. "It's not an excuse," he said, his voice breaking. "I let everything bottle up, and I lashed out in the worst way possible. I've been working with my therapist to understand why I let myself get to that point, to fix it. But I know I might never fix what I did to you." I sat in stunned silence. I had expected defenses, excuses, and maybe even deflection. Instead, he was taking full responsibility. No justifications, no blame shifting. For the first time since that night, I felt like I was seeing the Jasper I used to know. Then he said something that caught me completely off guard. "I'll sign the divorce papers," he said, his voice trembling. "If that's what you want, I won't fight you on it. But before we go there, I need you to know something." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Hesitant, I took it and opened it to find a handwritten letter. "It's from your mom," he said. My breath caught in my throat. My mom had passed away 2 years earlier, and her loss still felt like a raw wound. "How?" "She gave it to me a month before she died," Jasper explained. "She told me to hold on to it and give it to you when you needed it most. I know I've lost the right to decide that for you, but I think now might be the time." My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. Her familiar handwriting blurred as tears filled my eyes. "My dearest Serafina, if you're reading this, it means you're facing something you feel you can't handle. I wish I could be there to hold your hand, but since I can't, let me remind you of something you've always known deep down. You're stronger than you think. Life will hurt you sometimes, in ways you can't imagine, but it's not the pain that defines you. It's what you do with it. Choose love, Serafina, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's courage. And no matter what happens, know that I believe in you." The letter ended there, but the words lingered, wrapping around me like a warm embrace. I folded the paper and looked at Jasper, who was watching me with cautious eyes. "You didn't have to do this," I whispered. He shook his head. "I owed it to you. I owed it to her. She believed in us, and I let her down. I let you down." Yet for the first time since that night, the anger inside me began to soften. It wasn't gone, but it no longer burned as fiercely. I realized that while Jasper had hurt me deeply, clinging to my rage wasn't healing the wound, it was keeping it open. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," I said, my voice steady, "but I'm willing to try. Not for you, or even for her, for me, because I need to let go of this anger if I'm ever going to move forward." Jasper's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. As we sat there, the heaviness of the past started to lift, replaced by something much lighter, an unfamiliar sense of hope. It wasn't resolution, not yet, but it was a small step toward healing. For the first time, I could almost believe that healing was possible. The days following our conversation were anything but easy. Healing isn't neat or smooth. It's messy, unpredictable, and often doesn't feel like healing at all. I spent hours reflecting on the words my mom had written and the discussion I'd had with Jasper. For so long, I had thought of forgiveness as excusing someone's actions, as letting them off the hook. But the letter my mom had given me reframed it. Forgiveness wasn't about making what happened okay. It was about choosing not to carry that weight with me any longer. I took a step I had been hesitant to take before. I started therapy, My therapist helped me unpack not just the events of that night, but also the years of small cracks in my relationship with Jasper. She encouraged me to recognize that, while his actions were wrong, they didn't define him or me. I wasn't weak for feeling conflicted, nor was I naive for wanting closure rather than revenge. Jasper and I agreed to limit our communication to therapy-facilitated sessions for a while. We both needed the space to heal individually before we could even consider what, if anything, might come next. In those sessions, I began to see parts of Jasper that I hadn't noticed before. He was vulnerable in ways I hadn't expected. He spoke about his childhood, the constant pressure to succeed, and the shame he carried for not being able to manage his emotions. He didn't ask for my forgiveness directly. He knew that was something I had to find on my own, but he expressed sincere regret for his actions and his commitment to change. For me, those sessions weren't about giving him another chance. They were about reclaiming my voice. I spoke honestly about the pain his actions had caused me and the trust he had shattered. Saying those things out loud, in a safe space, was both painful and liberating. Outside of therapy, I began to rebuild my life. I threw myself into my work, took up yoga, and reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. Willow continued to be my biggest support, always there with a cup of tea and a grounding perspective when I needed it. One afternoon, she said something that really stuck with me. "You know, you're stronger now than you were before all this happened, not because of him, but because you chose to face it head-on." Her words resonated deeply. The strength I was finding didn't come from the situation itself, but from how I chose to respond. I also started volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping others who had experienced emotional or physical abuse. Hearing their stories reminded me that healing is different for everyone. Some found closure by walking away and never looking back, while others found it by mending broken relationships. What mattered was that the choice was theirs, and now I knew the choice was mine. Months later, I ran into Jasper at a bookstore. It was an unexpected encounter, and it felt awkward at first. We hadn't seen each other outside of therapy sessions since that day in the park. He looked healthier, more grounded, and there was a calmness in him that hadn't been there before. We exchanged a few words, but there was no lingering tension, no uncomfortable silence. Just two people, standing in a moment of mutual understanding as different versions of who we once were. "Hi, Serafina," he said, his voice gentle. "How are you?" I hesitated before answering. "I'm better," I admitted. "How about you?" He nodded. "Same. Still working on myself, but it's getting easier." We ended up chatting for a while, sharing small updates about our lives. It felt oddly natural, like two old friends catching up. When we parted ways, I didn't feel the familiar sting of anger or sadness. Instead, I felt a quiet sense of peace. A few weeks later, during one of our final therapy sessions, the topic of our future came up. Jasper spoke first. "I don't expect anything from you, Serafina," he said, his tone earnest. "But I want you to know that I'm grateful for the chance to show you I could be better, even if it's too late for us." I took a deep breath, gathering the words I had rehearsed over and over in my mind. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about this," I began slowly. "And I've come to realize that forgiveness doesn't mean we go back to what we were. I forgive you, Jasper, because I need to free myself from the pain. But I believe it's best if we move forward separately." His eyes shimmered, but he nodded silently, understanding. "I get it," he whispered, his voice barely audible. That decision wasn't easy. It was heartbreaking, but it felt right. Forgiving Jasper didn't mean forgetting or excusing what had happened. It meant releasing the anger that had been consuming me, allowing myself to move forward with peace. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild my life. I moved into a new apartment, a space I could truly call my own. I filled it with plants, soft lighting, and furniture that felt comforting. The solitude, while lonely at times, became an opportunity for self-discovery. I rediscovered passions I'd left behind, like journaling. Writing became my therapy, a way to work through the emotions I had been bottling up, and also a way to reflect on how far I'd come. I wrote about my anger, my pain, and, over time, my gratitude for the lessons I had learned. One evening, I found myself reading my mom's letter again. Her words felt even more profound now than they did that day in the park. I realized that choosing love, as she had advised, didn't mean staying in a toxic relationship. It meant loving myself enough to walk away. It meant allowing Jasper to find his own path to healing, separate from mine. Letting go of the grudge didn't erase the past. It didn't erase the hurt or the betrayal, but it changed how I carried it. I no longer saw myself as a victim of what had happened. Instead, I saw myself as someone who had faced something deeply painful and had emerged stronger. Jasper and I lost contact after that final session, but through mutual friends, I learned that he continued his therapy and eventually began mentoring others struggling with anger issues. Hearing that he was trying to make amends in his own way gave me a sense of closure. As for me, I began writing a blog about resilience and forgiveness. I shared my journey with the hope of helping others who might be facing similar heartbreak. The responses I received from women who had experienced their own pain and found strength in it reminded me that our stories have the power to heal not only ourselves, but also others. In the end, the greatest act of revenge wasn't about hurting Jasper or making him pay for his actions. It was about choosing to heal, to forgive, and to build a life that felt whole again. My mom was right. Forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was courage. And in choosing it, I found a peace I never thought possible. Forgiveness isn't just a gift we give to others. It's a gift we give ourselves. Letting go of anger doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened. It means choosing freedom over bitterness, healing over hurt. My journey taught me that while pain can shape us, it doesn't have to define us. We all face moments when we have to decide whether to hold on or let go. It's never easy, but letting go can transform our lives in ways we never imagined. What about you? Have you ever been in a situation where forgiveness seemed impossible but ended up being exactly what you needed? Or have you found strength in letting go of a grudge? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Your journey could inspire someone else to take their first step toward healing. Let's start a conversation about courage, growth, and the power of letting go. Have you ever found yourself at a crossroads where holding on to anger seemed easier than forgiving, but you realized that letting go was the only way to move forward? What if forgiveness wasn't just about the other person, but about your own healing? Serafina's wedding day ended in chaos when her husband, Jasper, threw a plate at her during an argument, shattering the perfect image she had of their future. In the days that followed, anger and betrayal clouded her judgment, tempting her toward revenge. However, after a heartfelt conversation with Jasper and a letter from her late mother, Serafina found herself reconsidering the path of forgiveness. Through therapy, reflection, and support from her sister Willow, she realized that forgiveness was not about excusing Jasper's actions, but about freeing herself from the weight of anger. Ultimately, Serafina chose peace, not revenge, and learned to move forward with a newfound sense of strength. From a perspective of emotional resilience, this story highlights the internal struggle many people face when confronted with deep hurt. Serafina's journey is a testament to the power of emotional self-care and the importance of self-forgiveness. Her decision not to retaliate, but to focus on healing, reveals how revenge often weighs us down more than the original betrayal. The story also challenges the idea that forgiveness means reconciliation. It doesn't necessarily mean returning to the old relationship, but rather creating space for personal growth and healing. In this case, the true strength came from the ability to choose peace over bitterness, a decision that required far more courage than lashing out. What would you do if the person who hurt you deeply asked for forgiveness, but you knew that offering it would mean letting go of your pride and anger? Could you find peace without making them pay for what they did? Have you ever struggled with the decision to forgive someone who hurt you? Or have you found strength in letting go of a grudge, even when it seemed impossible? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else take that first step toward healing. Let's talk about the power of forgiveness and the courage it takes to move on.